What if I told you that the greatest threat to Rome never came from the battlefield, but from the shadows? That while Roman generals marched triumphantly, their biggest enemies were already within the walls. For centuries, Rome built its reputation as an unstoppable war machine, defeating barbarian armies and expanding its borders without mercy. But what many don't realize is that while Rome's eyes were fixed on the horizon, spies and infiltrators worked in silence to destabilize the empire from within. It wasn't just brute force that the barbarians used against the Romans. It was intelligence and strategy in a deadly game of infiltration and sabotage. Imagine the terror of a Roman senator discovering that the clerk he trusted with his confidential correspondence was, in fact, a spy. Or the chaos in a legion when they realized their supplies had been sabotaged before a crucial battle. These agents weren't ordinary warriors. They were shadows among the Romans, sowing discord and destroying the stability of an empire that seemed unshakable. But how did these spies manage to infiltrate the heart of Rome? What were their tactics? And were their actions responsible for accelerating the decline of the greatest empire the world has ever seen? In today's video, we'll uncover how the barbarians used espionage and treason as silent weapons against Rome. We'll dive into the most intriguing accounts, infiltration strategies, and how Rome tried, often unsuccessfully, to protect itself from these invisible threats. Get ready to discover a dark side of Roman history rarely told. If you want to learn more secrets that shaped the history of the Roman Empire, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll help these fascinating stories reach more people, and you won't miss any of the surprising revelations like this one. Now, let's uncover the mysteries. In the grandeur of ancient Rome, where marble statues adorned bustling plazas and triumphant soldiers marched through the streets, an invisible threat loomed. This threat wasn't carried by swords or battering rams. It came from whispers in dimly lit corridors and secret messages passed in plain sight. Espionage was a shadowy weapon wielded by barbarian tribes against the seemingly indomitable empire. Yet these spies were not always outsiders. They were often embedded within the very structure of Rome itself, disguised as slaves, scribes, or trusted allies. Their presence challenged the Roman belief in their superiority, hinting at vulnerabilities they refused to acknowledge. Among the most unsettling revelations was the discovery of infiltrators who accessed the highest levels of Roman governance. Imagine the shock of a Roman senator learning that the clerk managing his confidential communications was, in fact, an enemy agent. These individuals operated in secrecy, blending seamlessly into Roman society. Their aim was to gather intelligence, disrupt key operations, and sow mistrust among Roman officials. But what made these infiltrators particularly effective was their ability to manipulate Roman arrogance, an overconfidence that blinded the empire to the threats lurking in its own halls. The impact of these covert operations was palpable. Supplies meant for critical battles would go missing, replaced with false leads designed to confuse Roman generals. Rumors would circulate, eroding trust within the ranks of legions stationed far from home. These tactics, though subtle, wielded incredible power, eroding the foundations of the empire from within. What's striking is how little the Romans seemed prepared for this type of warfare. Their focus on external enemies left them exposed to a quiet but devastating force. But why were these tactics so effective? Part of the answer lies in the intricate social and political dynamics within Rome itself. The empire thrived on its complex network of alliances, but these very alliances often became weak links. Allies could be bribed or coerced into betraying Rome, and those who were mistreated found ample motivation to aid their enemies. It's a sobering reminder of how a society's strength can also become its greatest weakness. As these infiltrators tightened their grip, questions began to arise. Were they merely exploiting cracks in Roman society, or were they actively creating them? And how did Rome, an empire so vast and resourceful, fail to counter this growing threat? Rome's greatest strength, its military dominance, was paradoxically its Achilles heel. The sprawling empire relied heavily on auxiliary forces, composed of soldiers from conquered or allied tribes. While these troops bolstered Rome's ranks, they were also a constant reminder of the empire's precarious reliance on those it had subdued. Many auxiliaries harbored lingering resentment toward their Roman overlords, making them ripe targets for bribery or coercion by enemy forces. What should have been a symbol of unity often became a tool for espionage and betrayal. The integration of outsiders into Rome's military and administrative systems was a calculated risk. On one hand, it allowed the empire to manage its vast territories efficiently. On the other, it exposed Rome to threats from within. Stories abound of auxiliary troops abandoning their posts mid-battle or leaking crucial information to barbarian tribes. These betrayals were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern of exploitation by foreign agents who understood the cracks in Rome's seemingly impenetrable armor. Sabotage extended beyond the battlefield. Supplies were stolen or contaminated, roads were blocked, and critical infrastructure was targeted. Such acts often went unnoticed until their consequences became dire, revealing the extent of barbarian cunning. One chilling example is the poisoning of a Roman governor by a trusted ally who turned out to be an enemy operative. These betrayals fueled paranoia, as Roman officials began questioning the loyalty of even their closest confidants. This culture of distrust had far-reaching implications. Rome's leaders became increasingly insular, prioritizing security measures that often alienated their allies further. Resources were diverted to counterintelligence efforts, stretching the empire's already thin defenses. As a result, the barbarians' psychological warfare achieved what their armies often could not: the erosion of Roman confidence and cohesion. Yet this raises an important question. Was Rome's inability to safeguard itself a reflection of its arrogance? Or were the barbarians simply more adaptable? This interplay between internal decay and external pressure set the stage for a shift in the balance of power. As the barbarian infiltrators refined their methods, Rome's vulnerabilities became glaringly apparent. These spies were not just passive observers. They were active agents of chaos. Their sabotage went far beyond stealing information. It included tampering with supply lines, inciting rebellions, and creating rifts among Roman officials. Their strategy was clear: dismantle the empire from within, one calculated move at a time. This was no longer a battle fought with swords and shields. It was a war of deception and manipulation, and the barbarians were proving themselves masters of the craft. One of their most devastating tactics involved targeting the empire's critical infrastructure. Supply depots were destroyed, trade routes were disrupted, and fortifications were undermined. Such actions often forced Rome into desperate responses, spreading its military thin and leaving key regions exposed. In one notable incident, a fortified city near the empire's borders was overtaken not by an invading army, but by an uprising led by local workers secretly loyal to barbarian leaders. This shift from direct confrontation to subversion gave the barbarians an edge that Rome struggled to counter. But the most insidious part of their strategy was psychological. Through rumors and false reports, they created confusion within Roman legions. Commanders were misled into deploying forces to the wrong locations, while distrust among soldiers grew rampant. The paranoia even reached Rome's highest echelons, where senators began accusing one another of collusion with the enemy. This internal discord was precisely what the infiltrators aimed to achieve, as it weakened the empire's ability to respond cohesively to external threats. What made these tactics so effective was the barbarians' ability to blend into Roman society. Many infiltrators assumed roles as merchants, diplomats, or even entertainers, allowing them access to critical information and locations. Their presence was often dismissed until it was too late. This invisibility added a layer of fear and uncertainty. Anyone could be an enemy. It forced Rome to waste precious resources on identifying threats that weren't always there, further weakening the empire's defenses. As the barbarians' methods grew more sophisticated, the cracks in Rome's foundation deepened. The question became unavoidable. How could an empire renowned for its strength and discipline fail to adapt to this new form of warfare? What role did Rome's own arrogance play in its downfall? The consequences of barbarian infiltration were far-reaching and devastating. By undermining the very systems that sustained the empire, the infiltrators exposed Rome's over-reliance on its own perceived invincibility. The empire had always prided itself on its ability to adapt to challenges, but this new threat was unlike anything it had faced before. Instead of clashing swords, it was confronted with the subtle but relentless erosion of trust, stability, and resources. This shift forced Rome into a defensive posture that drained its treasury and morale. Investments in counter-espionage and internal security surged, but these measures often created more problems than they solved. Distrust permeated every level of society, from the Senate to the legions. Allies were treated with suspicion, and citizens faced harsh scrutiny, leading to widespread resentment and weakening the bonds that held the empire together. The barbarians' infiltration strategies also had a lasting impact on Rome's military strength. Legions once feared across the known world became fractured, with internal conflicts and leadership disputes undermining their effectiveness. Commanders who once led with confidence now hesitated, fearing betrayal from their own ranks. This hesitation proved fatal during critical moments, allowing barbarian armies to make significant gains along Rome's borders. What's more, the infiltrators revealed how dependent Rome had become on the loyalty of its conquered peoples. For centuries, the empire thrived by integrating diverse cultures into its fold. But this inclusivity became a double-edged sword. The very people Rome relied on for labor, military support, and economic growth were often the same individuals exploited by barbarian leaders. It was a stark reminder that dominance alone could not sustain an empire forever. In the end, the infiltration campaigns left an indelible mark on Roman history, accelerating the empire's decline. But was Rome truly a victim of barbarian cunning, or was its collapse inevitable? If the empire had survived longer, would it have adapted to these invisible threats, or would they have simply taken new forms? If you've just witnessed how barbarian infiltration tore apart the very heart of Rome, you might be wondering how the empire ever stood strong against such subtle threats. Well, there was one army that seemed unstoppable, the legendary 10th Legion. In a world of shifting alliances and betrayal, this unit defied the odds at the Battle of Alesia, achieving the impossible. How did they do it? The secret lies in their unwavering loyalty and discipline, elements that were in stark contrast to the fractures in Roman society exposed by those infiltrators. Click here to discover how Caesar's 10th Legion turned the tide of war and why their story holds the key to understanding Rome's struggle to maintain its grip on power. You won't want to miss this next chapter in the rise and fall of one of history's greatest empires.